Hello, this is Whitney Whale from Star Hearth Astrology, and here I am today to talk to you about the full moon eclipse in the sign of Taurus. Yeah, I'm not going to be in the video today. It's just not really feeling it. Yeah, so in this video, I'm going to talk about the eclipses. I'm going to talk about the eclipses changing signs. I'm going to talk about what does it mean to have a lunar eclipse. And I'm going to talk about how to apply it to your birth chart and how to use the astrology information to ground yourself in the present moment, and make sure you're kind of soaking up the good parts and grounding yourself and having compassion on what can be just objectively a complicated experience, as all eclipses are. So let's drop into what eclipses are and kind of where and why they happen and the storylines that they offer us. Because we are headed into eclipse season. It starts with this first eclipse that happens in the very, very early hours of November 19th. And then it will go through the next 2 weeks. We'll have another eclipse that happens on December 4th. And then it extends beyond that until our first uneclipsed lunation, which is going to be a full moon in Gemini that happens in the middle of December. So we're headed into a month of eclipses. And now the most intense time tends to be this 2-week period between the eclipses. So between November 19th and December 4th is some really kind of potent time. And it's really hard to get more specific than that because it's going to show up differently for everyone. But in general, the way that eclipse season feels and what we call the dragon portal, the 2 weeks in between eclipses, is that things feel faded. We kind of have like, there's often a more somber tone to the things that happen, not because things are necessarily sad, but because we're kind of calculating things on deeper levels. We're kind of, right, the shifts that come from eclipse season kind of come up from the ground through us. They're kind of these internal changes that create these ripples that ripple out into our lives, but it tends to come from an inward sense if it's going to do anything at all, which sometimes they don't. And not every eclipse is going to be super significant for you or your chart. But it could be significant for your relationship or your partner. So even if it's not affecting you specifically, it's important to just kind of have our eyes on these things because we live in the world and a lot of our experiences involve our relationships. So when we have eclipses, we have them because there's a new moon or a full moon kind of within a certain number of degree of the nodes. So it's going to be different for new moons and full moons. I forget which one is which, but one of them is 9 degrees and the other one is 15 degrees, like a new moon within 15 degrees and a full moon within 9 degrees of the nodes will be eclipses. And so you can see the north node is still in Gemini in this chart, and the south node is in Sagittarius. But this eclipse is only 3 degrees away from the nodes, even though it's in a different sign. And that is because the nodes are about to shift. So we get kind of our first eclipse in the Scorpio-Taurus axis, which is our introduction to having eclipses there for the next 18 months. We'll be having eclipses there about every 5.5, 6 months until our final one, which happens on May 5th of 2023. So the key thing for interpreting this eclipse is going to be figuring out which houses it falls in your birth chart, if those houses are profected or especially profound houses, if you're a fixed sign rising. So that means if you are a Scorpio or Leo or Aquarius or Taurus rising, these eclipses, you're moving out of a period where the eclipses, which have been in Gemini and Sag for the last 18 months or so, they're moving from a less significant place into a more significant place. And I don't mean significant in terms of like an absolute sense of things being more important. I mean significant in the sense of when we have eclipses occurring in angular houses, so 1, 4, 7, or 10, which if you are a fixed sign rising, fixed sign eclipses will be occurring in 2 of those. They tend to have more obvious outcomes, like because the angular houses have to do with these really key components of our lives, our relationships, our sense of self, where we live, and kind of what we're trying to do in the world. And so when we have big shifts happen in those spaces, it's very obvious and our life changes structurally. Whereas the other houses rule kind of smaller pieces of things. And so, right, we might have changes in consciousness if things are happening in the cadent houses, so 3, 6, 9, or 12. Or we might have kind of changes in kind of the way that things are going with 2, 5, 8, and 11. But when things are happening in angular houses, that usually means we've got big, big shifts. So, yeah. So that is a key to this. Also, if 27 of Taurus lands on anything natally, that's going to be significant, because what's happening right there is that 27 degree, and you can give it about 3 to 5 degrees on either side. So we'll say 22 and then through the end of Taurus, is that the full moon is illuminating that. So it's bringing it into stark relief. And I like to think that full moons are kind of this call back to our bodies, this call to connect with the world around us, this call to remember what we're doing. Because the moon represents our memory and our connections, and it is connected to the biological and cyclical patterns of the world. And so when it is fully illuminated, that's when we're kind of fully leaning into that. But then what happens in an eclipse? Well, a shadow covers it. And it gets blotted out. And I think what happens is that the moon is our translator. She's our filter and our translator for things that are kind of beyond our consciousness into the earthly. She is kind of the key to manifestation in terms of she is related to the biological and natural cycles of waxing and waning, and growth and death and decay, and how things have beginnings and they have culminations and they have periods of release. And so when she is shadowed and disappears, basically we lose the filter, and then we're experiencing the raw form without the filter. And that is not really how life normally goes, right? So now, whatever she's filtering into us, we don't have this kind of this like divine atmospheric mother who is helping kind of pre-digest these superhuman archetypes into the earthly. And so they can come in really raw form and really big deals. And what she's doing at 27 degrees of Taurus is she's right on the fixed star Caput Algol, which is the demon star. It's a star of decapitation and bloodshed, and there's a lot of violence. So we have an exalted moon. Usually a Taurus full moon is kind of this abundant full moon where we're connected with our bodies and we're connected with the ancestors. We're having, we're in the middle of the harvest feasts of the pagan new year, but we have the sun down in the transformational space of Scorpio. But the moon is highlighting this very violent star. And so we might find that that Taurus's desire for comfort and safety, gets blotted out, and there's a little bit of a rampage quality that's possible to come out. So this is a little bit gnarly, and we're getting this eclipse, we're getting this full moon just not even 2 days after the exact Mars-Uranus opposition, which we can see here in the chart as well. And that has a violent and volatile quality to it as well. Not volatile in the sense of violence, though that can also be there, but volatile in the sense of it's explosive and we don't really know what's going to happen. So, sometimes we have transformations that are beautiful and we're kind of leaning into Neptune and we drift off and we get this beautiful insight from a dream and it changes our whole day and our whole life and we're feeling graceful. This is a transformation that is not like that. This is sudden. It is a sudden come to Jesus moment. It is, there's a lot of volatility. I think, looking in the weeks ahead, we have the Thanksgiving holiday coming up. There are, a lot of us are going to be traveling, really, probably not for the first time since COVID, but, we're still kind of traveling in the time of COVID. We're going to see people we haven't seen. We're going to deal with, rubbing each other raw on issues of vaccines and politics and all that kind of normal charge around Thanksgiving. We're also kind of feeling the fear of Scorpio as it's getting triggered by the Saturn-Uranus squares, and Taurus is frantically trying to stabilize it. We're craving this kind of more connective experience, and yet this full moon does a kind of bait and switch in terms of the comfort of Taurus and then the revelation of Algol. So what do I think we do with all this? This all sounds very doomy. Well, the things I like to remember is that you've been through one of these before, probably. And throughout history, they've been through these, right? Some people are going to have really big things happen this day. Most people are not. If it's not falling on anything, it's probably fine. If it's activating things through aspects, it's bringing them alive in a violent way. And that can be a potent and wonderful wake-up call for some of our sleepier placements. Some that like to hide will have to come out and play, and that can be a beautiful thing. Also, eclipses have much longer effects. So, it's not necessarily that anything is going to happen this specific day or this specific week, although that's very potent. But we are going to see the storylines highlighted here over the next 6 months. And then by the end of April and May, we're going to be having, we'll have 2 eclipses in Scorpio and Taurus. And so we'll see the deepening of that storyline. Other things to know is this is an eclipse on the North Node. And so this has to do with what we're hungry for in life. And so there's a kind of hunger and an insatiability. I posted on Instagram this week about getting thirsty for transits and really craving the North Node and Taurus, right? And craving is a North Node word. I'm excited to have kind of the collective energy in connecting with nature, taking the climate crisis more seriously, being more excited about food. I'm nervous about Uranus on the North Node. I'm nervous about having eclipses join this kind of axis that's been so activated in the last year by the Saturn-Uranus squares. But I also am excited for the boat to kind of rock a little bit and for us to kind of lean into some Taurus energy, because I'm feeling like the intellectual factions created by the nodes in Gemini and Sagittarius, I just feel like we're really fractured. And I really want to kind of get into that primitive, that primal sense of embodiment that the axis of Taurus and Scorpio so well brings into our awareness and our connections. So we have the first eclipse in Taurus and Scorpio, but the nodes haven't changed signs. And the second eclipse of eclipse season on December 4th will be back in Sagittarius. And we will have our final South Node solar eclipse in Sagittarius, kind of starting us off on this, starting us off on the journey of wrapping up whatever the Sagittarius and Gemini eclipses have been about. I will return in a couple weeks to talk about that. And we're about to enter Sagittarius season, so keep an eye out for my Sagittarius forecast video, which I will be posting on Saturday or Sunday. Stay safe. This eclipse is going to be visible. You can watch it. Eclipse astrologers usually don't recommend that, especially this one, because it's really tied up with this nasty fixed star. If you're feeling brave, you can roll the dice on that. If you're feeling like maybe you just want to keep the volume down on these things, there's enough excitement, there's enough tension in your life, maybe sit this one out and just have an early night. Okay. Thank you all for watching. Like, subscribe, share my videos. It means so much to me. Register for my broom making workshop, which I am hosting on the December 4th eclipse. And hope you all have a beautiful eclipse season. May it bring you many deep revelations.